Hello, my name is Dr. Yaninichka. I'm an associate professor at Duquesne University, and today I will be showing you and also giving you tips how to solve a mutant screen problem. And this is from my genetics course that I teach. So the problem is there are 5 Neurospora mutants that were isolated, and they require a nutrient Z to grow on minimal media. Each were tested for growth with supplementation of 3 known precursors in the linear pathway WXY. Now, these are not in the potential correct order, right? They're just listed with these results. 3 and 4 grows on X. Mutant 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 grows on Z. Mutant 4 grows on W. And then mutant 3, 4, 5 grows on Y. Now, the question asks, what is the order of the precursors? And also, it asks you to place the mutants in the pathway. Now, as I do this, I'm going to also give you a few tips how to approach these kinds of problems in genetics. The first thing I recommend is that you simply write out what kind of information is provided in the problem. Okay, so what information is in the problem? And as I talk, I'm going to solve it for you. And then I will show also in the video the actual notes that I write down and the solution. So if we look at this closely, we find that the information provided that there are 5 Neurospora mutants, right? And those mutants are numbered. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Now, we also have information on which particular supplements are required to grow on middle media of each of those mutants, right? And so the information is growth on minimal media with supplement and those supplements are W, X, Y, and Z. And we also know from the problem that Z is the nutrient that is required to grow these particular uh, Neuroprasa mutants, right? Now, the next question is, what does the problem ask for, right? And so the problem asks for the order of the precursors, right? So the compounds that are in a metabolic pathway that leads to the nutrient, and also the position of the blocks in each of these mutants in one of these steps in the pathway. All right, so we'll write that out. Now, the third step, or I should say the third thing before we actually start doing the problem is what you need to do is you have to identify the type of problem with it, right? Because in genetics, in these different problems, a lot of them are going to sound similar and they're going to appear similar potentially. And if you basically start doing and solving a problem in a way that isn't appropriate, or really it's a different type of problem, you're going to be led down a path that is going to be very frustrating because first you're going to get to the wrong solution. It's not going to make sense, and you're going to waste a lot of time, right? So those first two things are going to allow you to determine which type of problem it is, and from that you can then assess what approach you're going to use to solve it and break that down into steps. Okay, so this type of problem is a mutant screen. Now that we know it's a mutant screen, we have to break down how we do our answer based on the order of the appropriate way to get to the solution, right? So the first thing you want to do in a mutant screen problem, step one, is to place the compounds in the correct order of that linear metabolic path, right? So now that we know that it's a mutant screen, one of the assumptions is that that metabolic path is linear, right? So we need to basically place those compounds in the correct order. And next, you want to think about, okay, what sort of concept do you use to do that? And so the concept you're going to use is fairly simple, right? And it is that compounds that are farther downstream, the pathway will grow more mutants. And that makes sense because the nutrient is at the very end of the pathway, right? And the nutrient is going to grow all the mutants, right? Because that's what all those mutants need. And so that's what you can use to kind of remember the correct way to look at this concept. The farther down in the pathway, the more mutants will grow. And so write that out. So that, again, the concept we're going to use is the farther down the pathway a compound is located, the more mutants it will grow. All right, and now we can just start writing out and cataloging all the compounds and how many mutants they grow. So compound, and we're going to actually order them. We're going to organize our answer to make it easy to get the order, right? And so we're going to start working from the right to the left. And therefore, what we're going to do is we're going to first list the one that grows the most mutants. Then we're going to list the one that grows the second most, and so on until we get to the one that grows the fewest. So compound X, that grows 5 mutants. Sorry, compound Z grows 5. So compound Z grows 5 mutants. And the mutants are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Compound Y grows 3 mutants. Those are 3, 4, and 5. Compound X grows 2. And those are 3 and 4. And then compound W grows only 1 mutant. That would be mutant 4, okay? And so now all we have to do is write out these compounds in the order from the fewest mutants that they grow to the most mutants they grow, right? And so that would be W. Next would be X. Then we would have Y. And then we would have Z, right? And then we'll put arrows between them going from left to right to show the steps from converting one precursor to the other and ultimately into the nutrient, okay? And to confirm that we have the correct order, we notice that Z is at the very right side of that pathway, and that is the nutrient needed to grow Norrisburg process, okay? And so W would be the very first precursor. Now, often there's a step to make that precursor as well, and we can potentially add that on there, right? Again, one of the assumptions is in these kinds of problems is that it is a linear pathway, okay? And then just a general convention of how you write it is you write the order and the progression left to right, okay? And I recommend you doing it horizontally because that is easier to write out. Now, what is the next thing we need to do? the next thing we need to do is we have to determine in which step of this pathway does each of these mutants have a block, right? Because the block's coming from a error that knocks out one of these enzymes, right? So that step can't be done, and therefore all the subsequent molecules or compounds cannot be made, and therefore the string can't grow, right? So step 2, again, we'll write that out, is to place the mutants in the correct position based on where they have a block. The block, okay? And the concept, again, it's nice to think about specific concept. So that first step, again, the concept was the farther down the pathway compound is, the more mutant cell will grow, right? And so what that step is doing is the order of the mutants, or I'm sorry, order of the compounds. So that's this first step. The second step is to place mutants in correct position based on where they have the block, right? And so how are we going to determine that? Well, think about it, right? If we have a mutant with a block in the pathway, right, it can grow on the nutrient, right? The nutrient is downstream of that block, right, that it has. And so therefore a mutant can grow on all compounds that are downstream of its block, and they cannot grow on any compounds before its block, right? And the reason that is logical is because if it gets some compound, right, that's ahead of its block, it can't do anything with it. It can't make it into the next precursor or into that nutrient, right? And so we can do this one at a time, and we basically can just, we don't really need to do it in any kind of order in this particular case. We can just go one mutant at a time, right? And so again, we just start listing that out. Now I'm gonna put the position of these mutants onto that pathway that we drew on that first page when I show this in the video and post it, right? And again, we can start with mutant 1. Okay, so mutant 1, it will grow on only Z, right? So if it only grows on Z, that means Z is after its block, and it's the nutrient, and every other compound is before its block, right? So the only possible position is the step between Y and Z, right? So we'll put it there. Mutant 2, that one will grow on Z only as well, right? So both 1 and 2 only grow on Z. So in similar fashion, it would also have to have a block before Z, right before Z, right? And after all the other compounds. And so in this case, it is in the same position as mutant 1. So there's basically 2 in that step that converts Y to Z, right? Now, mutant 3, that will grow on X, it grows on X, it grows on Z, and it grows on Y, right? So it's going to be before Z, it's going to be before Y, and it's going to be before X. It does not grow on W, so the block is after W. So for mutant 3, its position is between W and X. Mutant 4, that one grows on X, Z, W, and Y, So it grows on all of them. So all of those compounds are after the block that that mutant 4 has, right? So we're gonna put it because we don't have any information on any precursors or anything that leads up to W. We will put it on the step before W. And finally, mutant 5, that one will grow on Z. And it will grow on Y. It does not grow on anything else. Oh, it does not grow on anything else, and therefore it's gonna be in the step. Its block is gonna be in the step between X and Y. Okay, and so now we have the linear order of the compounds, and we have been able to place the positions of the blocks in each of these different mutants, right? And so we've solved that problem. Now, when you're solving the problem, here's just some general tips on how you approach these kinds of problems, right? So first of all, again, I want you to structure your answer. And as I did in this particular example, first figure out, again, what information is provided in the problem, what you need to obtain at the end, what the problem's asking for, and then figure out and kind of logically use a series of steps, and each of these steps you're going to apply some concept to basically derive that part of the problem solution, and then it's going to lead to the natural progression of that problem until you get the final answer, right? So basically I will describe that as organize your answer. Now, another tip I have definitely is work the problem out on scrap paper. And that's really important because before you before you actually write a solution that you're going to turn in with your homework or write a solution on the exam, right? The first time you go through it, obviously you're going to be making mistakes. It might be disorganized. So you really want to work on that problem and then do a final version of the solution that's well organized and well written and nice and clear that you're going to turn in with your homework or on the exam. So I'm going to put a note on here, or as a tip, that make your answers clear, concise, and well written. Another tip is that to get full credit, you have to justify your answer. And so again, you justify your answer by explaining the concept that you use to rationalize the solutions that you're making to that particular problem, right, at every step of the way. Another tip is to make sure that you use proper labels, right? So label all these different things and elements that are in your problem, right? So don't just write 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Somewhere in your answer, label that those numbers refer to the mutants. X, Z, W, Y, make sure you have them labeled as those being the compounds in that metabolic pathway, right? So label all these things. And then finally, make sure that you use the correct terminology and nomenclature for the different problems. So for example, if we're talking about this particular type of problem, right? Make sure you label it and mention that it's a mutant screen, right? If we are doing a complementation test problem, right, which is a natural follow-up to determine how many genes some of these mutants are, whether they're in the same gene or not, right? That is done by creating a heterokaryon, right? So if you're doing that problem, make sure you mention specifically that you're dealing with a heterokaryon, right? Don't call it a hybrid cell. Don't call it a heterozygote or polymorphic. It's a this type of cell where you bring two mutant nuclei together in a neurospore process. It's a heterokaryon, so you need to use that terminology. Later on, when we do things like uh, the inheritance problems, ratios of phenotypes and genotypes and different progenies from different crosses, applying Mendel genetic principles or the principles of Mendel. We have different types of designations for different alleles in garden peas versus how they are annotated and the convention for naming alleles in, for example, Drosophila, right? So when you're doing a linkage map with Drosophila, you need to use the specific allele designations that are used in Drosophila. And if you're doing a cross of different pea plant varieties, then you need to use the convention for naming alleles in the garden pea, right? So those are, again, things that you need to do that's going to help organize and provide clear answers and to ensure that you're not losing points and so that you get the full credit on these different problems, whether it's in homework or an exam. Okay, so I'm going to end it with that. I am going to also post the solutions to the problems as well. And I hope that you found this useful and interesting. Again, the main thing is that you want to be able to organize your problems and then identify what you're actually trying to answer. Some of the biggest issues I see with students sometimes doing these kinds of problems is really that they miss something in the question and they basically go down the wrong path and they're trying to answer a question uh, thinking that it's a different kind of problem, right? And they're basically completely led astray. And if it's on exam, they're losing time that they could be allocating to another problem, and of course they also get the wrong answer, right? So again, stay organized, stay concise, work things out, make sure you applying the correct principles, and that's going to help you get the correct answer to the problem and get your full credit. So I hope this was useful, and I'm going to try to post additional similar videos that help explain how to approach different kinds of problems. Thank you.